Alright, well, I've misplaced, lost, done something with the footage that shows these final castings before I started machining them, where I did the layouts on them and everything. I'll go back and do a little bit of a recap on the patterns and the follower plates and show you some finished castings for these. Here we're just machining the backs of these castings. This is the mechanism that hooks on the base part. It has a little eccentric cam in that hole that I just drilled, which will be tapped, I believe, half 20. And that activates the arm that indexes the platen to the proper position. So the top hole that I drilled was just half 20. It will be tapped half 20. These are going to be 1032 set screws that just hold it to the back. Now in the casting on the top that you're going to see, it's actually on the left hand side that's down in the vise as we look at this. Why, there'll be 3 clearance holes there for quarter 20 bolts that go, and that actually sets the position where they go on the back of that base plate. Okay, this one will be half 20. These will both be 1032s. And we got 3 more holes to go on the top there. Now here we're just tapping this top hole, half 20. Normally I'll do this in the milling machine while I've got it set up and just use a collet in the quill to index where it sets. I didn't have the head tall enough to do that, so we're just manually tapping this one by hand. There's our replacement, or our next one that we built. Tapped quarter 20, got to put the sets in it. Tapped half 20. These are just clearance holes, they bolt down and tap into the base. So there we go. I can go ahead and put this part of it back on the base that it was already set up on. I thought I'd show you the point we've reached on this press. The first press is mounted back on the bench and ready to go into service, with the exception to whatever I do on top for hoppers and everything. There'll be some changes there. This press and the other press are both virtually done. I still have to do a little bit of machining on the retainer on the rod for the wad guide on the other press, and then it's just a matter of cleaning these up, getting the parts powder coated, and reassembling. So I'm going to try and finish up the machining on these and get the few parts powder coated that I'm going to coat on this. But I wanted to show you operation. This is our swing out wad guide here, and we've got our auto advance, and we're looking at the machine from the back, of course, so you've got a better view of it. But when it cycles through, why, here's our auto advance mechanism. As it comes down, it's spring loaded, of course, and it will cam here on this bottom and swing out the wad guide. So that's all that's left to, that's the way those are done. This wad guide assembly itself will not work with a swing out wad guide. It will, but there's clearance issues for putting your wads in. It can be done, but I'm going to build new wad guides for it. I could just call Hornady and order new ones. I need a couple of the parts, but I think we're just going to machine them out. We're already this deep into it, so it's not that big a deal. Anyway, that's the swing out wad guide. And the auto advance, these are my cast parts here. And then we've got it installed and assembled to where it functions right. And it works fine. So we're going to go ahead, machine the other one, strip this machine down, and get these pieces powder coated, get our bottom pieces epoxied in, and then we'll clean these machines, reassemble them, and get them ready to go back into service. We can turn around and look at the machine from the front. See the same setup. Wad guide swung out, and there it returns back in. Seats your wad, advances your platen, swings your wad guide out, and you're ready to load the next one. Works perfect. There we go. Alright, well, we're making it down to some final assembly now. A lot of this is going together for the last time. The swing out wad guides, my pieces are powder coated here, and I went ahead and epoxied both of them in place. So they're situated where they're finally going to be. I'm going to go ahead and assemble this press. And we've been to the hardware store and gathered up some new hardware for some of this stuff. Here's my wad guide, all powder coated up. Same way with the auto advance. These are the ones that I cast. And this is the part that goes on the bottom of the carousel there. So the first thing that's going to go back on these is the auto advance mechanism, and this is, like I say, the one I cast, and this operates on a little cam is how you set the advance. How you set the advance, or how much advance you've got. So when you look at this, this is set up on a eccentric, if I can get it to turn here. Alright, so when you turn the adjustment on this, it operates on an eccentric and goes just like that. And it's half 20 thread on a shaft, and then it's drilled and tapped quarter 20 offset. So that'll be that adjustment. So the first thing is, this sits on here just like that. I get these set screws out of the way. That will sit on there just like that. Turn it so we're facing this press. This is what I'm working on. So that will sit on there, and it just sets flush to the table. These set screws will help tension it, but let's get all three of our bolts started in here. Here we're just going to fast forward through this, just adjustments and setup. There we're adjusting the little cam. We want to make sure that this piece sits flat with the base of the base casting, which is why it's set there, and that's what those two screws, those two set screws on the back hold it in position there. And then the three on the back, you just tighten them down snug or for a good solid fit, because if you over tighten them, well, you can torque it out of position, and it'll force the base down, force the base casting up, and the little attachment that we put on there down. So we want to set that, use the set screws to set that fairly solid in place, and then we just lock everything down so it can't move with those top three bolts. Pretty straightforward here. We have to do little adjustments as we go along and just make sure everything's there. It's centered up pretty well by eye from where the other one was positioned. It can be slid left to right across there to make sure you have enough cam action to it. So I wanted to be pretty careful of the way that I adjusted it, or made sure I had it in position before I drilled those three holes in the top. Alright, so there's that part of the auto advance. This is my rendition of the auto advance, and this is the factory Hornady retrofit here. So I'm pretty happy with my reproduction of it. And your spring fits on there just like that. And then it will slide on our shaft right here. Okay, we've got a C-clip to go on there. And once the C-clip's installed, it operates just like that. And on top, we've got a roll pin here. And this is our pawl mechanism. Ah. It sits on there just like that. And then in operation, this cam, or this will sit on this cam. When it hits, why it rides it forward and advances it to the next location. Just like that. Okay. So we can go ahead and from this place we can install our swing out wad guide, because there's retainers on the bottom of it. So our rod will go down through there. And then on the bottom side, these were originally retained by just a little C-clip. and I didn't really like the way it worked on there, the way it retained. So what I did is I just put a little collar on it. If I can get it back in place. This also gives me a little adjustment as far as setting the length on it, because I can shorten the little shaft itself. Or the little collar itself. Come on, get on there. So my little collar just sits right down over the top, rides on that washer, and there's our eccentric cam. So then this sits right on top. Bolts go in our cam arms on the end. There we go. Snug on there right like that. That casting sits right on top, and our bolts retain it. Handle here. Except we've gotten ahead of ourselves now because we have to take it back off to put the wad guide on. So while we've got it right here, let's go ahead. Actually, that times up really good right there. So we've got a jam nut to go on there. Jam nut goes right on there. That's perfect right there. Good. That will sit right there. Now let's pull the top off again and put our wad assembler, or our swing out wad guide on. Alright, here we're just, we've got our swing out wad guide installed, I believe. This is the chute going on the back that drops the loaded shell down through the platen and diverts it down into our catch box. Was what I was just installing there, and that's what those screws are going there. These are plates that I built. I have to go back and adjust them just a little bit. I formed those just a little bit too wide. They still want to interfere with the rod bosses on the end, on the base there. So we have to go back and potentially make a little bit of adjustments to those. We reformed them just a little bit, and that takes care of them. They work fine then. Okay, I may have to do some modification to that trough a little bit. I don't have the primer assembly ready to go in. The wad pressure screw has to go back in yet. But we have swing out wad guide that works, and the auto advance is properly adjusted. So those are the main things we were after today. Let's see here. We can put our, this assembly has to go back in. We'll set right in here. This is for our automatic powder drop. I've got the countersunk screws to go in there, but I think they're going to have to take a, or they're going to need a little bit of work. I got hex head countersunk screws to go in there, but I believe the heads are a little bit big for the countersink that I put in there. We may have to either make that countersink bigger or cut down the screw heads or narrow up the screw heads just a little bit. These are all little adjustments that will happen as we finish putting them together and clear off our parts assemblies here. The countersunk screws I was talking about are just for the ring, the index ring around the outside of the platen there. And I used a countersunk ring that we've gone back and had to, I shaved the head down a little bit more and rounded it. And it had to be a flat head there rather than the button head that's on the rest of those on the outer ring, just because the little dog that sits on top and advances the platen interferes with that screw, or that screw would interfere with it. So we had to put a flathead screw back in there. Oh, our bolts are too long here. We're going to have to shorten them up. It didn't matter that they were too long before because we didn't have auto advance on it. So I'll have to go back and shorten up those bolts. Or put shorter bolts in would be the smart thing to do. Now I still have to work on the primer assemblies for these two, and the swing out wad guides for one of them. Now here we're just putting in the wad pressure gauge setup, and it's got a little C-clip on the bottom of it. The assembly won't fit back in with the outer ring on there, so we're just loosening that outer ring and swinging it out of the way so that we can get that assembly on down in there. Then to get the E-clip on the bottom, I just used a socket to apply pressure and relieve the pressure on the bottom side of that assembly. Alright, well I went ahead and got the wad pressure assembly back in there, and the easiest way to get the little gauge and the clip on there is I just took a socket, set it on top, and ran it up against pressure to slide it on down. That gives you clearance to get in there and work on it, or to get those assemblies installed. Now I think we can go ahead, reassemble our nut on the top of it is all we're doing here. And we're going to adjust the tension of this platen. And you want it tight enough to where your shells aren't allowed to flex too much. It holds them properly indexed and pretty much straight up and down, but it's still got to be loose enough to where it'll index freely, the way most progressive presses are. Very nice. A few little adjustments, but that one is pretty much back together. And we'll be able to mount it to the bench to at least get it out of the way so it's not sitting out here. I'm going to rework these assemblies, but for now let's just set it back on there. There again, that way it's up and out of the way. We'll completely rework these top assemblies too, but like I say, I just want to get them up and out of the way for right now. Primer filler will go back in. And that looks like everything's back to some sense of a functional form. So wad guide and primer assembly are pretty much all that's left on this press, other than just a few little minor adjustments. And whatever we do with the top assemblies. But it looks like I'm out of parts here. I'm missing one little screw for underneath here, and that's going to take a little bit of adjustment too. Alright, we've got these presses back in place and mounted and functional again. I'm going to kind of call this complete, although we'll go back and we'll do a few things that show the machining of the wad guide, new wad guide, and a few other little things that we did. But anyway, hopefully you found something a little entertaining here. If you did, why, you might want to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you hit the bell notification, you'll know when I put out a new video. And if you like these videos, give me a thumbs up. You might want to share them. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch.